BB Fahodi and straight black pride brothers and sisters. This is your brother, DC Radical 1, with a new segment, DC's Radical Thoughts. DC's Radical Thoughts will be a audio-only podcast. It'll be a stream of consciousness podcast where I will talk about thoughts and ideas that I have based upon observations of the world around us. Sometimes they'll do with politics, sometimes with culture, history, religion, even occasionally entertainment. But these are just things that I've been thinking of that maybe somebody else has been thinking of too. So with that being said, this is episode 1. And episode 1, I want to talk about culture and identity. And this discussion is sparked by multiple things. Recently, I found myself needing to recenter myself. And I started reading a book that I purchased probably a couple of years ago when it was released. And the elder that published it, that the author, I met him before. He's local, Baba Ajay Koda, and now he's an ancestor. He's joined the ancestral realm. But this book, Nation Building, was written, I believe, in 1992, and then it was recently re-released, probably about 4 years ago, I would say. And so I started reading it recently, and at the same time I picked back up Baba Walimu Barudi's book, Identity. And it's so interesting because it has coincided with what I see as an identity crisis. Me and Brother Jenny talk about this in our community, the Black community, Black American community, where seemingly everyone wants to be everything except African. We have people who are American descendants of slaves. We have people who are foundational Black Americans. We have people who claim to be the original Indians. We have Moors. We have people who just go by their religious identity. They're just Christians or Muslims. They're not. You don't even hear the word Black Muslims anymore. Or you have people who identify as the N-word. I saw a person tweet, it was maybe a year ago or so, I'm not sure, that he would rather be an N-word than an African. And so, in the midst of this chaos of identity and the destruction of our historical memory, the desecration of our history, culture, and the desire to be less than what we are because of a lack of knowledge. Cameron, the rapper, who's never been known as an intellectual, said recently that he's just a Black American because he's no longer African American because Africans don't mess with us. What he's basing that upon, I have no idea. I found that it's just a ridiculously ignorant statement. And one of the things that's occurred is that our people are very, we're not deep. We don't have a lot of deep thinkers, and the deep thinkers that we have are not placed before the people. They're not given a platform to reach the people. They're not giving support economically and financially in order to build institutions. And so the people among Black people who actually think, who actually ponder things, who actually analyze, who actually read and do research, who actually travel. Those people are not the popular people in today's time. And one of the things that's taken place, I say relatively recently, is the exaltation of celebrities as mouthpieces for black people. And it's so interesting. I was watching one of my own lectures dealing with a book, and it talked about one of the things they talk about is the use of celebrities to influence the people. That this was, in fact, as part of the World Economic Forum program. So when I think about that, the idea that the quote unquote powers that be would use celebrities to alter the thoughts of people. I mean, it's no longer conspiracy theory. This is documented. But it seems particularly effective in today's climate among our people. And then you have the various influencers on social media. You have people whose ideas are broadcast and pumped up to the mass of people. And you have people who are presented as leaders and activists who aren't leaders and activists. And you have a lot of confusion in our community because of this. And so, even myself, someone who is I consider myself well studied in our history and our philosophy, self-educated, because I had to be for the most part. Even myself, I found myself needing to recenter myself and to re-anchor myself to our historical, cultural, spiritual foundation in the midst of this onslaught of chaos, where we live in an age where we're told that men can be women and women can be men, and that if you don't accept that, then you're the problem. Where people are trying to educate children, well, not trying to educate children, people are giving children propaganda that's age inappropriate through the school system. We're in an era where it's controversial. Now, I just found this fascinating. Dr. Umar Johnson appeared on I can't remember, some platform, and apparently one of the things that was controversial that he said was that black men should be with black women. Somehow what black people have been doing for 10 million years is now controversial, right? It's now, he's being attacked not by non-black people, but by black people. And from what I've seen, particularly young black men, this stream of self-hatred and self-denial and self-denigration that's going on amongst our people is very detrimental and devastating in a time where we're in the midst of what appears to be the collapse of the United States of America. If there was a more inappropriate time to double down on being American despite the treatment we have received, now would seem like a time where you would at least have to question that. Now would seem like a time where someone would scan the globe and see what alliances they can make to see a place maybe where they can have a future. Right now, if we look in America, I mean, it's always been divided. It's as divided as ever, but the thing that, if you pay attention closely, that you realize is, and in my lifetime, we may well have the least competent American leadership that I've ever seen. I won't go into details of why I think that is, because I think it's intentional. But one cannot look at the Congress, the Senate, the presidency, and even to a degree the courts, and have, if you're paying attention and you've lived long enough to see, at least some form of competency in government, you will notice at this time in America a lack thereof. If what we saw was occurring during the Trump administration, it'd be more understandable. You'd have an outsider who's outside of government, and their first time in a big government situation, it would be understandable. And this time, with probably the most experienced person to ever lead the country, we've been in government longer than I've been alive, and it's obvious that health and cognitive abilities of President Biden are in question to the point that even his constituents and supporters and whatnot are discussing replacing him with someone else. It's not really, it's interesting that many black people would take this time to double down on their Americanness. Despite, if we really look at the state of black America, what do we have? Let's just be honest. What do we own? What can we claim as ours in this society? If you look at our business infrastructure, it is very limited. If you look at our land ownership, it has decreased. We are losing farmland. We have rising homelessness. We have rising poverty. We have declining health. We have an increase in mental illness. We have a crime problem in many of our communities. And the source of the crime problem is our own people. The state of black America is not good. And yet, many of our people are just holding on to what appears to be a sinking ship. And they're holding on tighter than ever. And they're trying to force other people to hold on to the sinking ship. Now, I'm not saying that we should just abandon the experience that we've had here for 400 years and act as if it never happened. Well, I'm not saying that everyone is economically, physically capable of packing up and rolling out. No, that's not what I'm saying. I understand that. But my point is that the eternal part of being black, the part that extends beyond the origins of America. There are some black people who were enslaved and were still here before the United States of America existed. This is a fact. So who were you before the United States of America existed? Who were you before the colonies that became the United States existed? Who were you before the English came here and brought you here? Who were you before the European invasions in Africa. Who were you before Europe existed? See, these are questions we have to ask ourselves, because black people, if you will, existed before Europeans, Asians, and Arabs, and even so-called American Indians existed. Black people were the first people on the planet. And to be honest, black people existed before the name Africa existed. We have millions of years of history. Dr. John Henry Clarke says we have over 10,000 years of civilization that occurred before we even knew that Europeans and Asians and Arabs existed. A lot of that history has been hidden. A lot of it has been destroyed. But that doesn't deny the fact that it exists. The information is out there. Have black people traversed the seaways and gone to different places around the planet? Without a doubt. The simple fact of the matter is, you can leave from the west coast of Africa if you have a sturdy enough boat and come to the Caribbean area on the outskirts of North America. You just need a seaworthy vessel. You don't even have to be a skilled sailor. The currents will take you there. The same currents that come off the west coast of Africa and form hurricanes in the Caribbean. That same current will take you from the west coast of Africa to the Caribbean in a seaworthy vessel, if you can survive the trip. So us traveling here, that's not a question. Black people in Africa learn to travel the waterways because of the river system in Africa. Most of our civilizations were built around various rivers, most notably the Nile, which everyone knows. But that's not the only river. And that's not the only river system. There are river systems all over Africa. And civilizations sprung up around them, and people use them to travel. And you can use that as a testing ground to, okay, you can travel the Nile. Then you can travel the Mediterranean. Once you go around the Mediterranean, suddenly you're in the Atlantic Ocean. You travel far enough south, you'll meet those currents that I talk about that'll take you to America. So there's not a debate of whether there were some black people in this place or that place, but does that negate the Africanity of the person? If you are an African and then you're kidnapped and you put on a slave ship and then you come here, when you get off the boat, are you an African or are you not? I would say you're an African. If your ancestors in, say, 1200, 1300 Common Era explored from West Africa and took a ship and came here and you never left, but then were captured when the Europeans came and sold into slavery, does that make you not an African? Because you were here longer and you set up an outpost and then were overrun? Does that make you not an African? And so I say all that to say that there's no... Dr. John Henry Clarke said something profound. And a lot of these groups nowadays, they do this. He said, if you start your history with slavery, everything else looks like progress. And a lot of our people nowadays whether it's ADOS, FBA, or people who are Black American, quote unquote. They're starting their history with slavery, and they're identifying as an enslaved person. But no, they're not identifying as an enslaved person. Let me correct myself. They're identifying as a slave. To identify as an American in a country where you were subjugated means you're identifying as a slave. You're not identifying as an enslaved person. That's a different mentality, because many people have been enslaved. But people who choose to be a slave, there's a difference. And many people nowadays who choose Americanism over their Africanity are choosing to be slaves, in my humble opinion. I'm sure they don't see it that way. But when you listen to ADOS people and, they're talking about we're all mixed. Yeah, you're choosing to be a slave because the mixing came by way of rape. The mixing came by way of torture. The mixing came by way of subjugation and barbarity. There wasn't no voluntary mixing. It came by way of manipulation. We almost never talk about the times where European females were basically put before African male. Either you can voluntarily engage with me, or I can lie and say that you took it, and then you'll be killed. How many people are born of those unions of manipulation and fear? Right? We always talk about the lack of agency that the Black woman had in slavery. We rarely talk about the lack of agency the Black man had. We rarely talk about the sex farms. We rarely talk about the brutalization and sodomization of the Black man. We know about the torture, rape, and barbarity that was done to the Black woman. Even if we don't really talk about it. Apparently we don't talk about it enough, because I see more and more sisters with European males, but that's not today's discussion. Although it is tangentially related to today's discussion. But in the midst of all this chaos, I think it's important that we anchor ourselves in an identity that goes beyond the now, and that goes beyond the 200 plus years of America, that goes beyond enslavement and colonialism, that goes beyond the onslaught of Europeanism on the minds of Black people. We anchor ourselves to the eternal identity that we now call, in the modern context, African. That millions of year old legacy of tradition, history, and culture that we built, tracing itself all the way back to the Nile Valley, the southern part of the Nile Valley, as opposed to not just ancient Kemet that everyone loves to talk about and dispute. Unnamed civilizations, or at least unknown to me, the names of which sometimes have been erased from time. And yet in that place, in that space, in that core, is the essence of what it means to be an African, to be a Black man, a Black woman, a Black child on this planet. In that space, you'll find that the essence is the Black family, Black man and Black woman and Black child, Black children, Black grandmothers and grandfathers, aunts and uncles. And that interaction is the foundation for what would become civilization later on. And that's why, if you really pay attention, that relationship, the relationship between the Black man and the Black woman, is under attack every day via social media and other media. they try to tell you that you should do everything except, if you're a black man, you should do everything except be with a black woman. If you're a black woman, they'll tell you you should do everything except be with a black man. Why? There's many reasons. One, it's slow genocide, plain and simple. Two, and I've said this before and I believe this, our enemies believe in the black messiah more than we do. The simple fact of the matter is that the more black men and black women get together and produce black children, the more likely it is that they'll produce another Marcus Garvey, another Malcolm X, another Jean-Jacques Dessalines, another Menkaure Tahuti Mays, another group of people to go along with that modern day Dessalines or that modern day Malcolm X or that modern day Marcus Garvey, right? That modern day Ida B. Wells. A group of people to support that person, to protect a modern day Thomas Sankara or a modern day Kwame Nkrumah or a modern day Patrice Lumumba. That is their greatest fear. And the simple fact of the matter is, the more black men and black women get along, the more likely they are to reproduce, and the more likely they are to reproduce children who love black people and who are willing to fight and indeed kill and in necessary die for the liberation of black African people. And so to neutralize that threat, having black people not identify as African, having black people not, having black men not like black women, and black women not like black men, is part of the agenda. It is the goal of our enemies to have us destroy ourselves so that they can simply say, we had no hand in it, they destroyed themselves. So, for those of us who are intelligent, it is important that we recenter ourselves and re-anchor ourselves and get back to studying our history, culture, and traditions, including the ones that we brought over here, the ones that we modified here for our survival, and reconnect with our families and build new families based on shared interests and understanding. Some people simply not going to understand. They'd rather be N-words than be Africans, and those people, there's no need to argue with them. There's no need to be around them. There's no need to interact with them, because they have made their declaration. They want to be slaves. And those of us who want to be free and build a better future for our children, it's best to interact with each other and get to work, because time is short and the number of people willing to do the work is small. So, brothers and sisters, I thank you all for listening to this new format. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and give me feedback on what y'all think about this new podcast audio only format. This is DC Radical 1, and this has been DC's Radical Thoughts.